Welcome back to another fact video, and we're looking at more facts you did not know about survival craft number 2 and number 1. Now you see some of the facts will be the same except a little more detailed. So anyway, in 2011 survival craft number 1 was created, and back then the tools used to be like 2D, a lot more like Minecraft stuff. However, eventually, Callous Woodpress turned them into 3D, except for a few which didn't become 3D until Survival Craft number 2 rolled around. And you see, the musket was not added until 2015, and back then, the musket bolt along with it wasn't actually like 3D. It resembled more of a 2D structure. Survival Craft number 1 stopped getting updates since 2016 when its successor Survival Craft number 2 was released. And in 2016, Survival Craft number 2 looked a lot more like Survival Craft number 1. It had no clubs, and it had a stone rake before. The axe looked more like the copper axe, iron axe, and the diamond edge axe. Also, dispensers did not always have accept drop until 2017 when Survival Craft 2.1 was released. In fact, the workbench was once first called a crafting table when Survival Craft number 1 was released. However, eventually it was changed into a more recognizable design, except it wasn't fully brown until Survival Craft 2.2 was released, and it was later rebranded and renamed as a workbench. The spike plank was not added until Callous Woodpress decided to add a wild boar, the first mob that came into the game a few years ago. In fact, sparrows and pigeons were not added to the game until 2.3 rolled around, which is the update we are on right now. And also, if you were to kill a sparrow, you would not get much from it. You see, try killing a sparrow like this. Now wait for it to drop, for its droppings to come out, and you might notice that it does not actually drop out actual bird meat, except just rotten bird meat. Also, in fact, when boats were added to Survival Craft, back then, they were not like Minecraft boats, except they will bob around, and in fact, you cannot actually destroy them. When you go on land, these boats can also get stuck on land, which means you have to push them back into water every single time. And they will bob around as long as they could, and eventually they might float away, so make sure you have your boat always stuck to the land. Survival Craft number 2 and 1 also had a variety of cell doors and iron fence gates. They also do have walls that are cold fences too. Also, Survival Craft number 2 does not have any beds. In fact, you have to either lie down on either a soft surface or at least a few carpets, wood, carpets, or even leaves. In fact, to make a bed, you had to build a big version of it and then use the hammer to create the bed. However, this was not an easy process either. In fact, you need to try to attach the two parts. You need to create the two parts of a bed and then attach them together. In fact, according to the Recipedia, in the description, so in fact, the iron hammer was only able to create about 16 to 16 by 16 furniture, meaning you will have to create a separate type of furniture and then attach them later on, which still was not an easy process. In fact, Survival Craft's first commercial didn't actually come out until 2014, and even then it was still on their main channel. Survival Craft number 2 was a little more shorter, 5 minutes and 21 seconds, while the first one was 8 minutes. Now in fact, before skins were added, you only had this man who is now called Walter. However, even then, he used to be a blocky man without a smooth face, and he looked without a beard and very light hair. He also did not wear ragged clothes, and in fact, he looked more like Minecraft Steve, the one you recognize in Minecraft, except without a beard, which looked like a smile. He had a few features like Walter, like black eyes and a pink mouth. However, it wasn't until 2014 when Survival Craft decided to turn him into this figure you know today. And then Survival Craft 2 rolled around and added more skins for you to choose from. Also, Survival Craft didn't actually add multiplayer. In fact, maybe you will know that Survival Craft needs to add multiplayer, but the reason why I'm saying this is because in Survival Craft's video before they announced 2002.3, many players were suggesting Survival Craft that they have to add, multiplayer. However, I don't think Callus Woodpress actually got the clear message until 2.3 was announced, and I'm pretty sure he may not post for about another few years. Now, in fact, if you were to dig straight down, you would be able to find bedrock. However, here's what would happen if you tried to mine the bedrock. You just need to wait. You just need to be patient in order to get to the bedrock, because it's going to take a bit of time. Okay, so we're now in bedrock, and here's what would happen if you tried to mine it. Not even certain survival and creative can even mine the bedrock, and no one is sure why. Also, you may have heard of it. Also, if you were just new to Survival Craft, you probably saw crouching. Well, back then, this was not always the case, and it was known as sneaking, just like in Minecraft. However, 2.3 rolled around right now, and you were finally able to fit into small spaces, whilst before 2.3 you were not able to fit through small block spaces. But also, you would look a little weird if you, did this. That you would look a little weird if you actually crouch down, because you literally don't have a crouching animation, and this is what it would actually look like. Pretty weird, huh? Well, indeed it was. Now, survival craft number 2 also has pistons that actually go a very long way. In fact, this is how long the piston will be able to go in survival craft number 2. Not only that, you can also adjust the piston. You can adjust how much blocks it can actually pull, and maybe you can turn it like very Minecraft-like. This is 1 block. And this was 8 blocks. Very high, huh? But in fact, you also were able to get a pulling piston. However, the recipe to this is not very easy. In fact, go to the Recipedia and you might find a recipe. Yes. In fact, a pulling piston used 1 iron instead of vines, just like Minecraft. And in fact, I guess I can understand the reason why they decided to make the recipe is because it acts like a magnet. But however, it doesn't actually make sense. Like, you have wood and then pulling piston can actually like, magnet it. Now in fact, before rotten foods were actually added to the game, you were not able to get sick. In survival craft number 1 and survival craft number 2 before, rotten food wasn't even a thing, and raw foods were safe to eat before. However, eat too much and eat some more rotten foods, some raw foods, and you will get sick, and this wasn't very pleasant. And thankfully you wouldn't get sick by eating raw foods back in survival craft number 1 and early survival craft number 2. However, nowadays it shows especially the taste odd no more, and then yeah, you could eventually get sick if you eat too much raw foods. You can't also even drink milk or even eat soup. In fact, it doesn't even have this eating sound unless if you're in, well, survival. Now in fact, here is a game mode that Survival Craft has just added. So if you were to create a world, you're gonna have to now do this. But back then, this was not always the case. In fact, you just had to click it multiple times until you get the gameplay you have. And I wish this was still here, but I guess it's now no longer a thing. In fact, survival. You may have heard of survival mode right now if you were just new to survival craft. Well, this wasn't even a thing, and if you were actually to create a world and give it survival mode, here's what it would look like. So, as usual, you have the ship animation, and it says Castaway Boys. Hey, you on the shore. And yes, so in fact, you spawn with a fish with you if you actually picked survival mode. However, in the other modes, it isn't really relevant. In fact, if you picked something else besides from survival mode, you would not even spawn with a fish with you. This was a controversial change since people were starting to worry more about food in Survival Craft number 2. Also, it turns out you can actually throw eggs in Survival Craft number 2 and number 1 in survival mode. Either in harmless mode, challenging mode, or cruel mode. However, there was a very low chance you would be able to see a bird spawn. And also, The birds will be useful if you really want to get yourself a new meal. Make sure the bird is at least enclosed so it can give you eggs anytime soon. In fact, make sure you lock the bird inside and you will be able to get yourself some food for yourself. Dig an underground area and put a chest underneath it. As it turns out, chests can actually take stuff that gets put inside. So you could be able to use this for your next egg farm. It will take some time though, so be patient. In fact, in either full moon or empty moon, where you would not be able to be so lucky. In fact, if you ever see wolves during an empty moon, make sure you run away, cause these can turn into a more dangerous mob called the werewolf. Now, the werewolves was added in Survival Craft number 1, but it also reached its way to Survival Craft number 2 when it was first released in 2016. In fact, how the werewolf will transform will look like this. Take a look. It's going to take some time, but I would recommend you take a look before you even download Survival Craft number 2 and 1 either. In fact, if you are far away from the werewolves, you will be able to see red eyes from them. They can also jump around and become more hostile than ever before. However, if it turns daytime, the werewolves will be transformed back into actual wolves. However, they can jump really high, but they can also be very useful for getting diamonds. If you have at least a musket, you would be able to kill a wolf easily and get a diamond. However, there is a low chance of this actually happening, so good luck finding diamonds from werewolves. That's all of the facts, and we're done here.